All right, so it's been about 3 weeks, 2 weeks and 5 days since I completed my Appalachian Trail Thru Hike. And so I'm doing this live stream to just answer any questions that anyone might have and just talk a little bit about the trip as a whole. So there was kind of one big question, you might say, that I never really answered all that well um, along the trail, and that one was kind of about, why I was doing the thru hike and what kind of gave me the idea. And honestly, it wasn't really any big event that gave me the idea. I was just kind of in college and had heard about the trail and had kind of seen some people do the trail at certain points and had seen some videos online about it and thought it looked like a cool thing to do. And, I'd always been an outdoors person, I guess, and had plenty of camping and backpacking experience and stuff like that. And, I just graduated college this spring and figured now would be a good time to do it. And so I would say around this time last year, like September, October timeframe of 2023 is when I kind of decided I'm going to do the AT after I graduate college. And from there, just got into some planning and started buying gear and equipment, around the beginning of 2024 and stuff like that. So that's kind of how I got the idea and the inspiration for it, I guess. And I had some questions, a little bit of questions come in beforehand, and then looks like we're getting some questions from the comments or the chat here. So I'm first going to answer the questions that I had beforehand. One person said they couldn't join the live stream, so they did ask some questions. So the first question was about being outdoors. They said, did almost continually being outdoors for 100 days impact you in any unexpected ways? And honestly, I wouldn't say it was necessarily unexpected, but it definitely made me appreciate, some of the luxuries we have. Like running water, having running water all the time where you can just drink it, when you're out in the woods on the trail, you got to filter all your water. So that just takes some time, and it's not like a big deal, but it's definitely slower than just being able to turn on the faucet and, having a toilet all the time and stuff like that, and lights and, just all the things that most of us probably take for granted. Definitely made me appreciate those a little bit more. But I would say, like mentally or physically, I didn't really feel any effects. And then the next question was about night hiking. They asked if I ever night hiked, and if I didn't, why. So I would say I didn't really ever night hike. I did hike a few mornings, which I guess is kind of night hiking in the dark, but for the most part, I would say at least 95% of the days, I would say 95% of the days, I hiked less than 20 minutes with a headlamp on. There was a few days, the first week or two, that I hiked, maybe 20 minutes with the headlamp on, and then there was a few days, the last week or two, that I hiked maybe 20 minutes with the headlamp on, and then I really can only think of maybe like 3 or 4 days that I actually hiked, more than 20 or 30 minutes in the morning with the headlamp on, and that was when I did the 4-state challenge. So I started around 3:15, 3:20 in the morning, so I hiked a good 2.5, 3 hours with the headlamp on there. And then my last day on trail, I hiked, I think I started a little bit after 5 a.m. and so I hiked around 2 hours there with the headlamp on. So I honestly didn't really do any night hiking, and I would say the reason for that is I didn't really have to, so I felt I might as well not, and just be able to see the nature around me. And more animals are generally out at night, so I'd have more opportunity to see that kind of stuff. So I just felt like I didn't really need to, and for the most part I didn't need to. And I don't know, for me, I'd rather prefer hiking in the daytime. You can see a lot more and seem to experience a lot more. So let's move on from that into some of the comments. Looks like we're getting a lot of comments here. First was about the difficulty. So the most difficult section, I think, was definitely southern Maine and through the Whites in New Hampshire. That was, I think, like the beginning of basically the third week on trail for me, the second to third week. Southern Maine was just tough because I didn't have my trail legs for sure at that point, and I definitely just took a little bit longer to hike because of that, but also there was lots of elevation gain and a lot of the terrain was pretty tough, so it just took a little bit longer to go over that terrain. Lots of rocky sections. I remember the Bigelow Mountains, and there was another big mountain in Maine that was tough. I can't remember what it's called now, but those were some tough mountains. And then getting into New Hampshire, the Carter Mountains weren't that difficult, and then I had the Wildcats, which the descent is very difficult going southbound into Pinkham Notch. That descent is super difficult, but that wasn't too bad. And then, going over Mount Madison and Mount Washington and all those mountains through the presidentials, those were definitely difficult and just tricky terrain, and lots of sections going through the presidentials that had lots of sections with big flat rocks that were at an angle and were easy to slip down and fall. I definitely remember there was one time where I was trying to walk down this flat rock, and I basically just started sliding, and most of the times when I started sliding like that, I just fell on my butt. But there was one time I kind of managed to slide down and stay upright all the way to the bottom, which was kind of fun there. But I guess that's enough about the difficulty. I did put out a video ranking the states and kind of talked about the difficulty some more there. And Sean and Jack are asking about Bigfoot and Sasquatch. I know Sean was warning me before the trip, but didn't see any Bigfoot or Sasquatch or really have any inkling that they were around. I wouldn't say I necessarily believe in those beings, but I know some of you might, which is totally fine. Favorite ice cream flavor? I would definitely say there was a Hershey's flavor that I had a few times. That was a banana pudding flavor, and that was really awesome. I enjoyed that, and I actually tried recreating it a little bit at home once I got home, and I think my recreation turned out great. I really enjoyed it for sure. What did you get your degree in? So I graduated this spring from the University of Cincinnati with a bachelor's in computer engineering and a minor in computer science. So that's what the degree was in. I'm looking for jobs kind of in the firmware embedded software field, so like lower level programming and software development. And so far I've only been looking like a week or two. I've had kind of one interview, but it was mostly just with an HR lady and wasn't super serious, so I'm still waiting to hear back from them, and that's pretty much it. So definitely hoping for some better luck in the coming weeks in terms of the job search. Did you have any issues with foot or leg discomfort? So I would say I definitely did have issues with foot and leg discomfort. Most of it was probably within the first month or so. I think probably the first week is when I developed most of my foot issues, just because it was so rainy and wet, and I just got really wet on going through the 100-mile wilderness. Had to go through some streams, ford some streams, stuff like that, and so my feet just got really wet and were just soggy for a number of days, and that kind of led to some problems down the line. I didn't really have too many bad blisters on my feet and toes, but I ended up having some pretty bad kind of blisters, but they were just kind of like sores and wounds on the back of my heels, and those were pretty painful, especially in the morning when I was kind of stiffer and not as warmed up, and just putting my boots on hurt a lot. And the first few miles of hiking hurt a lot for the first few weeks after that. But the good thing is that those wounds would kind of warm up some, and then they wouldn't hurt nearly as bad. And so that's how I got through it, and they eventually just kind of healed up. And by day 30, 40, 50, they were pretty much completely gone. In terms of leg discomfort, definitely in the first few weeks, I had some times when I kind of just had some muscle pain and like cramps, and almost like I had pulled a muscle a little bit there. But for the most part, it wasn't too bad. I remember I had something in one of my hamstrings at one point, one of my quads, and that was manageable. I was mostly able to kind of alter my gait or step a little bit, and if my right quad was hurting, I forget which one it was, but I would try to do like the ascents. If I was going up, I would try to step up with my left foot most of the time, and then just kind of match with my right foot, so that my left quad was taking most of the forces and doing most of the work there, just to give the right one some rest. And I think that helped, stuff like that. And then the last 3 weeks of the trip, I had some shin splints in my right shin, and those were pretty bad for a week and pretty painful. But I got through it, and they started getting better towards the end of the trip. And by the end of the trip, they were pretty much completely better, which is super awesome. And I'm super grateful that those healed up. Next question is about ticks. I definitely did have some ticks along the way, but honestly, I feel like once I got to the halfway point, maybe partway through Virginia, I almost had 0 ticks, if I recall. But I never had any ticks really biting into me. I think I maybe had 1 or 2 actually that were digging in a little bit, but not really too bad at all. Most of them I found, they were still just crawling around on my arm or leg or whatever. And so yeah, not really many issues with ticks. I expected to encounter more ticks, honestly, but I probably only had a dozen at most, which for 100 days on trail, I feel like isn't that many, but not sure. And no, I didn't, treat my clothes or gear at all for ticks. I think I put bug spray on once, which was on day 3 in the 100-mile wilderness. Someone just let me use some of their bug spray, and I put that on once, and that's the only time I use bug spray or any sort of chemical to prevent bugs or ticks or anything like that. So I didn't treat my gear or clothing at all. In terms of, there's a question about scary sorry, I lost it. Scary sounds at night. Honestly, the one thing I'm kind of disappointed in, just because it seems a little bit cheap, is the fact that, or maybe cheating a little bit, is the fact that for most of the second half of the trip, pretty much all the second half of the trip, I slept with earplugs in, and so I definitely really didn't hear anything at night, and I just found it helped me sleep a lot better, and I just felt more rested and was able to do the miles with less issue. So that's why I did it. So didn't hear any thing at night the second half of the trip. There was definitely a night in the beginning of Virginia, which I think was the first night that my mom and girlfriend and aunt were hiking with me. I didn't have my earplugs in at that point, and I heard a lot of stuff that night, and I didn't sleep super well, and it sounded to me what I would have thought a bear sounded like at night, pretty close to my tent. And there was another guy we had talked to, who was camping at that campsite, and he, just from talking to him, seemed like a very inexperienced hiker and backpacker, and I hadn't seen him hang his food on the bear pole at night before he went to bed. So I was kind of concerned about that as well, when I thought I was hearing a bear nearby. But we didn't have any problems that night, so that was good. And next question here, why'd you do SOBO rather than NOBO? Which is one I've definitely gotten a lot, both on the trail and now. And I think for me, going southbound, the biggest reason I thought of doing it that way initially is just because um, of the timing. So in my mind, I thought if you wanted to do it NOBO, you had to start like February, March, April timeframe. And I really, because of school and rowing and that stuff, I wasn't going to be able to start until the end of May at the earliest. And Katahdin didn't open until June 1st, but I wasn't going to be able to start till the end of May, so I figured I would just go SOBO and not have to worry about the start date. And then also, I had heard that obviously NOBO was a lot more popular and there would be a lot more people around. And for me, a lot of the allure of going on the trail was just being more alone and on your own, and doing this big thing on your own and having solitude and stuff like that. So the fact that there would be less people going SOBO definitely appealed to me in that regard. So I think those are probably the two big reasons I chose SOBO. And the first reason is really moot, given that I did it in 100 days, because I could have, I finished September 12th, so I could have been up Katahdin by then, before the weather got bad or anything like that. But I definitely enjoyed doing it SOBO. I'm definitely glad I did it that way. I enjoyed, the solitude, like I mentioned, and just the fact that there was less people on the trail a lot of the time around me and less people staying at the shelters and stuff like that. I really enjoyed that. Next question is about my next adventure or big challenge. So not really sure in terms of a adventure or big challenge. In terms of kind of fitness stuff, I do want to do the Flying Pig Marathon again this year. I tried doing it in the spring of 2024, and that's the big marathon in Cincinnati every year. But I actually quit at like 15 miles in, and I've run further than that before and have done better than that before, but that was like just a super bad run for me and it did not go well. So I think I want to do the Flying Pig Marathon again this year. And then there's some things I'm thinking about for next summer and fall, but I'm not really too sure about it, so I'm not going to talk about that yet. Two people asked sort of if I would do it again and if I'd go NOBO, or if I have a desire to do other thru hiking trails like the Pacific Crest or Continental Divide Trail. So I would say if I would do it again, I think I would definitely consider going NOBO, just because I think I'd want to try to experience something different and have a different experience there. So going NOBO would certainly be a different experience, and would be just an opportunity to do something new. I feel like I certainly feel like going southbound again would be fun, but I think it would be a lot more fun and novel to go northbound and experience that different culture and stuff like that. And I think, at least right now, I don't really have any desire to do it again anytime soon, but certainly not ruling that out. Maybe in 5, 10, 20 years, I will get the itch again and go back out there. Who knows? I know for a fact there's sections of the trail I want to go back to within the next few years. For sure, like the White Mountains, just because I didn't have great views. Mount Washington, the Kinsman's, Franconia Ridge, those mountains there. I definitely want to go back to those within the next few years probably, and just experience what they have to offer, because I didn't really get to experience them as much since the weather was pretty bad and I couldn't really see anything when I was going over those mountains. And in terms of the other thru hiking trails, getting the Triple Crown, stuff like that, again, not really much desire to go back out there and do that anytime soon. But I think, again, maybe sometime in the future it could be cool. And I think a lot of those areas would be really cool to visit and experience, but I don't really have any desire at this point to, do a big thru hike of that trail right now. So I've heard, hiking on the PCT, like in the desert, is super cool. So that could be something fun to do, but I'm not really sure that I would want to, like I said, do the, whole trail at once. Let's see. Yeah, definitely have had some people commenting about the hurricane, and good thing I finished before the hurricane came through, because honestly, that has really messed up a lot of people's SOBO through hikes that haven't finished yet. I know like Damascus got totally flooded, a ton of the hostels got flooded, and I'm not even sure if some of them will be able to reopen or not. I know south of there, let's see, the next big town is Irwin, which I know Irwin, the town isn't right near the trail, but there's a bridge that goes across the Nolichucky River. And then there's a hostel there called Uncle Johnny's, and I know the hostel got absolutely flooded and messed up there. And then I know that bridge got totally wiped out, so you can't even get across the Nolichucky River right now, which I think is pretty crazy, because when I remember going across that bridge, I'm pretty sure the river was at least like 10 feet below that bridge, so the water came up big time. And then I know Hot Springs, North Carolina, where the trail goes directly through, a lot of the roads there are just wiped out and washed out and really messed up. So that's really unfortunate. I hope, I know some people have gotten off the trail who are SOBO in that area. I know some people are choosing to continue, and I think both those are fine choices. That's your own choice, I think. So yeah, that's really unfortunate that that happened, and I hope those towns are able to recover and continue to be, lights on the trail for people, and places that people can find refuge during their thru hikes. Someone here says, if you don't have a job by spring, I should go Nova on the AT. So maybe I will, but I'm very much hoping that that is not the case, and I do have a job. Did you do any buying and selling of your dividend portfolio while hiking? So for those of you that don't know, I do have another YouTube channel where I have talked about investing in the stock market and dividend stocks, and I haven't really posted on there that much since January. Obviously I was hiking, so I wasn't going to post on it over the summer, but I did post a video just a few days ago about my portfolios and stuff like that. So to answer your question, I did do a little bit of buying while I was hiking. Mostly it was, when I was in towns just chilling out and stuff like that, and had a little bit of extra time. But I did receive a fair amount of dividends, which was exciting. Someone asked here about my hiking experience. So prior to the AT, I definitely had a fair amount of camping, hiking, backpacking experience, mostly from Boy Scouts. In terms of the hiking and backpacking, I think I really only did I guess you could call it 2 trips that were 50 to 100 days, or sorry, 50 to 100 miles, not days. And so those were, a week to 10 days. So not super intense or anything, but that's pretty much the extent of my backpacking experience. I wanted to do more training in terms of hiking specifically this spring, but I really just didn't have time with, I was pretty busy with senior year of college and just my other working out in terms of being on the rowing team and some running I was doing. So didn't really have much time to train hiking specifically, but it ended up working out. Congratulations. Thanks, Rebecca. Did you crave any certain foods while you were on the trip? So there were certainly some things I craved, at certain times. I would say, obviously, for me, I gotta say ice cream was one. But I would say one thing that was interesting, I actually started, even though I was eating Pop-Tarts every day, but I started to crave an actual cooked Pop-Tart that was made in the toaster, because sometimes they were just kind of dry and not very interesting. So I did have some extra Pop-Tarts at home, and I've been eating some of those in the toaster, or cooked in the toaster, and that's been nice. And there's certainly there was certainly, I had like Chinese food like once or twice on the trip, but before that I think I was craving Chinese food a little bit just because I hadn't had it in a while. Jack says, did you see Tara did it in 40 days? Yeah. So I thought it was pretty cool because when I was in New Hampshire, I passed a guy named Christian Morgan, Captain Morgan, who was attempting a fastest known time of the Appalachian Trail at when I passed him, and he was obviously going NOBO, so he was pretty close to being done, but he ended up getting injured, and he got off the trail in Rangeley, Maine, so he didn't set a new record or anything. But then I think around the beginning of August, there was another woman who started at Katahdin going south. Her name was Tara Dower. Her name is Tara Dower. She's still alive. I don't know why I say was, but she started, I think it was August 11th or 12th, maybe the 12th. And somewhere around the halfway point is where I heard about her, and heard that somewhere around her halfway point was when I heard about her and heard that she was, working towards that FKT, fastest known time. And she was going for the supported time. So she had a whole crew of people, that would provide her with food and stuff along the way. And she didn't really, I'm not sure what her sleeping situation is, but she didn't, have to set up her tent and camp every night on the trail. And she had people that were pacing her with her a lot of the time and stuff like that. So it was a vastly different experience and type of hike than what I did. And she was pretty much running the whole time. But she ended up completing the hike probably a week or two ago at Springer, and it was just under 41 days, which is pretty crazy. It was like 40 days, 18 hours, something like that. So honestly, that's just a remarkable feat. And she basically averaged like 54 miles a day, I think. And with, I think most days she had like 5 or 6 hours of sleep, so she wasn't sleeping nearly enough and stuff like that. So that's definitely super impressive. Huge amount of respect for that. Other than the Yogi Bear incident, scariest animal encounter, I would say the other scariest animal encounters were just snakes. Definitely in Pennsylvania and Virginia is where I saw, I think, only the 2 rattlesnakes I saw. Sorry, but the thing about Pennsylvania and the rattlesnakes is Pennsylvania was just so rocky, and so I had to look down at the trail a lot of the time, pretty close in front of me, and so I didn't see the rattlesnake. It basically just started rattling and hissing at me, and then I looked up and was like, oh, what is this? And then I saw it. So that was super startling. And pretty much a similar thing happened in Virginia, because it was just like in a rockier section of Virginia. Even though Virginia wasn't totally rocky, there were some rockier sections, and that's when I saw the other rattlesnake. So I would say the rattlesnakes were probably the other scariest. I think both the rattlesnakes I saw were timber rattlesnakes. I didn't see any copperheads. I saw plenty of other snakes, but most of them weren't rattlesnakes or anything that's really going to hurt you too much, so wasn't too worried about that one. What is the Triple Crown of hiking? The Triple Crown is basically the 3 big trails in the U.S. So there's the Appalachian Trail, which is by far the most popular. And then there's, I think the next popular is probably the Pacific Crest Trail that goes throughout California, up, I think into Washington somewhere, but I'm not sure, through the Sierra Nevada, stuff like that. And then the Continental Divide Trail goes through, Colorado, through the Rockies, and north and south of there. I'm not really sure where the terminuses are, to be honest. I'm not too educated about the Triple Crown. I just know it's the AT, Appalachian Trail, Pacific Crest Trail, and Continental Divide Trail. And so some people, say, oh, you're doing the AT. Are you planning to do those other trails? And I'm not really interested at this point in doing those other trails in terms of a through hike. Any memorable encounters? Sorry, I lost the message again. Any memorable encounters with either NOBO or SOBO hikers? Yeah, there was definitely a lot of memorable encounters. So In terms of SOBO thru hikers, well, the only person I really hiked with all that much was a young guy named Bogballs. I think he's just a few years older than me. So he started a week before me at Katahdin, but he actually didn't do Katahdin since he started earlier than that. And I caught up to him sometime in Massachusetts, and we were going back and forth for a few days, and then we ended up hiking together a little bit for a day, I think, and then he kind of went on ahead, but he was just a really fun guy and fun to talk to. He was in the Marines. He is in the Marines in the reserves. So he was fun to talk to, and I was kind of texting him back and forth, throughout the rest of the trail, just kind of updating each other on where we were at and how we were doing and stuff like that. So that was cool to have that kind of connection with someone else. And I didn't really have that for the most part with, I would say, pretty much anyone else. There was another hiker I encountered, which I'm really not trying to criticize her, because I'm definitely a big believer in the hike your own hike thing, but it's just kind of baffling me, like, what the thought process is, or like why she's choosing to do it that way, I guess. But her name was Snow Leopard. I first met her in the Whites on Mount Madison at the Madison Spring Hut, and then I met her again. I basically went on ahead of her, and then I met her again at the very southern part of New Hampshire that's out of the White Mountains, and then I went on ahead of her and then met her again in Pennsylvania at Pine Grove Furnace State Park. And she was from the Czech Republic, and she was an interesting person. She was super nice, but she always had like alcohol on her. When I was at Madison Springs, she had this like flask of whiskey that she had just bought like in town, and then later on I saw her, she had her smart water bottles filled with beer, and then when she got to camp, she pulled out like more beer in cans from her pack, which I was just like astounded by. Obviously if you want to carry that, that's cool if you want to do that, but I just thought that was interesting. And she ended up like skipping these sections of the trail so that she didn't have to do them, I guess, sections she thought were hard or whatever. And then she ended up finishing. She must have skipped even more later, because she finished like a week or two before me at Springer finished, I guess. So she was an interesting person. And then I would say one of the other notable people I met is this guy. What was his name? His name was Yard Sale, and he was a Nobo. I met him in New Jersey, which was probably around mile 800, 850, something like that. And he had started the same day as me, June 5th, at Springer Mountain going Nobo, and he was trying to do it in like 2 months. So he was going way faster than me. He had this tiny looking pack that looked so light. But he ended up finishing, I think, in 66 days. I saw one of his posts on the Facebook group, so he seemed like a pretty cool guy. I mean, we just chatted a few minutes, but I was super impressed by him. Hurricane, yeah, the hurricane was nasty. Fellow Mopar guy from Mount Katahdin. Yeah, that's really cool. I think it would be awesome, to live in Maine. Maine was one of my favorite states. Seemed like such a cool area. So much beautiful stuff there. Were you close enough to tell if the bear smelled bad when you ate your dinner? No, I was not close enough to that, and unless he smelled really bad, I probably wouldn't have noticed, just because my other senses were so overloaded and I was focused on trying to get that bear away from me. So yeah, I did not smell the bear at all, so not sure. What's your opinion on hanging food? Is a couple of pounds worth 20 minutes a day? So yeah, I hung my food in a bear bag the whole time, and that does cost a little bit of extra time. The thing I will say is you definitely don't have to spend 20 minutes a day, because a lot of the places will have bear boxes or bear cables or bear poles, and so if you are planning to stay at shelters a lot of the time, then a lot of them will have opportunities for you to store your food there and not have to actually throw a bear bag rope over a tree and something like that. So it's definitely not going to be that 20 minutes every day, I guess I will say. And in terms of the weight, I know the bear canisters or vaults or whatever you want to call them are a few pounds, so I'm not sure. It really depends, I guess I would say, on what your goals are and what you're trying to get out of the thru hike, which is really what I kind of go back to with a lot of questions. I think you have to decide, is weight a big factor? Am I trying to be like super lightweight? If you're trying to be super lightweight, then the bear canister vault thing is definitely not the right choice for you. Are you trying to be super efficient with your time and, put in a lot of miles and, try to be very organized and scheduled and focused? Well, in that case, then maybe you do want the bear canister, because then you can free up that time that is spent hanging in a bear bag. So I'm not sure what the answer there is. I definitely thought the bear bag was good for me. And for me personally, most of those bear canisters I saw were not big enough for as much food as I was carrying at some point. So having those 2 bear bags that I used throughout the trip was definitely, I think, necessary for me, just because, the regular sized bear canister that's like probably this tall, I don't know if you can see my hands, like this tall and like this big around, I don't think that was big enough for all the food that I was carrying at some times when I had 4 or 5 or 6 days of resupply with me. So that's kind of my thoughts on that. Brad, did you enjoy receiving letters from family and friends? Yes, I definitely enjoyed receiving letters from family and friends. It was a welcome surprise. I did not expect that at all, but I think my mom ended up sending some people out to, or sending some addresses out and stuff like that to, relatives and friends and stuff like that. So some people did ended up sending letters, and that was really awesome. And definitely just reminded me of people back home that I'm missing and stuff like that. So let's see. Uncle Jeff asks, how many gallons of ice cream did you eat? That is a good question. And honestly, I could probably answer that, but I would have to, go back and look at every single day. It's definitely over 5. I would say I ate probably 25 pints of ice cream, which is 6 gallons. So at least 6 gallons, I would say. Probably more than that, honestly. But any special meals you ate that you want to share? In terms of special meals, I think, at least with that question, I'm thinking about like stuff I had in towns and stuff like that. I think one of the best meals I had maybe was, I guess it wasn't even really a meal, but it must have been in Waynesboro, yeah. It was in Waynesboro, Pennsylvania, at the Sheets. It was like a bacon, egg, or sausage, egg, and cheese, like biscuit type thing. But instead of a biscuit as the bread, it was waffles. And that was so good. I love waffles, and so I really enjoyed that. And Emmy asked, did you still eat peanut butter pepperoni wraps? No, I haven't been eating peanut butter pepperoni wraps after I got off the trail. I think part of that is, well, I'm sure we probably do have pepperoni, but actually I did eat 1 or 2 because I had some extra pepperoni. And so I ate 1 or 2 like the first week just because I had some extra pepperoni, but haven't been eating those since. I still do eat a lot of peanut butter. I eat like yogurt every day and put peanut butter in there. I usually have like a peanut butter and jelly sandwich at some point. I make a bagel with peanut butter. So I definitely still eat a lot of peanut butter. Scariest part when you were climbing the tree? Yeah, that was, I guess that was a little bit scary, but I wasn't too scared. I was, like I mentioned, some people when I posted that were like scolding me and saying, "Oh, you're taking too much risk," blah blah blah, which is I guess a fair assessment. But for me, I wasn't too scared about that because basically what I did is I grabbed onto the rope that was further out on the tree than I needed to climb, and I held all my body weight on that rope, and the tree didn't break. So I assumed if I was not as far out towards the edge of the tree, then it wouldn't break. when I climbed up it. So I didn't feel too worried about it, but it was shaking a lot, which did not help. Did you have moments that you wanted to quit? From Julie. I wouldn't say I had moments. Maybe I had like instantaneous moments where I wanted to quit, but I didn't really ever fully consider it or seriously consider it at all. I would say that there's another question here from Kevin where you wanted to quit and go home. And with that question, I would say maybe there were some moments that I wanted to go home and just get off the trail just because it was just boring. Like I would say the closest I got to wanting to quit and go home, which really wasn't that close at all, I would say, was just in Pennsylvania. I was just bored. It just didn't seem like anything was happening. I didn't really feel like there was many good views. And yeah, I was just kind of bored and not really enjoying it, I guess. And what got me through that, or what I was kind of thinking about that got me through that mentally, I was thinking about two things actually. The first thing I was thinking about was the half-gallon challenge, which was in southern Pennsylvania, because I was excited about that, and that turned out to be not very exciting actually. And then the second thing I was thinking about is I knew my mom and aunt were planning to come visit me at the beginning of Virginia, so I was kind of looking forward to that as well. And those kind of got me through, I would say, Pennsylvania, those two things. And yeah, it was definitely boring, but those got me through. What are your future thru hiking plans? I would say right now I don't have any, like I mentioned, future thru hiking plans. Maybe at some point I will do another thru hike, but yeah, like I said, I don't have any plans right now in terms of the Appalachian Trail or one of the other big trails. But I think there's probably awesome things to see on those other trails. I just don't really have a desire to, do the whole trail or do the thru hike there. Dawn says they plan on checking in on Crazy Larry. Yeah, honestly, I've been meaning to text him. I have his phone number, just because I know I saw videos and pictures of Damascus where it was all flooded, and so I'm sure his house was flooded and stuff like that. So, yeah, that's really unfortunate, and I hope, people, the community is able to help those towns out and really get them back on their feet some. Why the trail name Snowman? So I did mention this a few times, but basically Snowman, I chose it myself, and the kind of inspiration thought process behind that was the movie Smokey and the Bandit. In the movie, the truck driver, I forget I don't know I think we do learn his actual name, but I forget it at this point. His, call sign on the radio is Snowman, and he sings like a song where he says he's eastbound and down. Well, I'm southbound and down, loaded up with my pack, like he says. And then there's a line at the end where he says the snowman is coming through, and that's kind of my thought process in terms of the 100 days thing. I wanted to be kind of focused and hiking quickly and something like that, and doing lots of miles. And I just wanted to be, I wanted someone to see me pass them and say, oh man, that guy's coming through. That was kind of the inspiration behind that, I guess. So like I said, I picked that myself. It's kind of, some people may think it's silly, and there was definitely people who were almost like, oh, that's a little lame that you picked your own trail name, stuff like that. But that's what I chose, and I don't regret it. So I guess I'll live with my decision. Thanks, Washburns and Cousin Jenny. Steve says, love your car. Yeah, I do love it, and I don't have any plans to sell it. Already answered that about not quitting. Curious to know, says Trisha, if there was a food that you got tired of eating out there on the trail. Like I mentioned, there was times when I definitely did not enjoy the Pop-Tarts all that much. They were just like dry and kind of boring. And there was definitely times when I got tired of the peanut butter. But that was mostly a dosage issue, I think. So, I had in my plans like, oh, I wanted to put, like one serving of peanut butter on some of these on the crackers, and then like two servings of peanut butter on the tortillas and stuff like that. But I didn't have any like measuring items. I was just like eyeballing it. So sometimes some items got more or less peanut butter, and so if it had too much peanut butter, it was like overpowering, and I got kind of sick of it at some point. But for the most part, I enjoyed the peanut butter most of the time. I would say, yeah, honestly, didn't really get tired of food that much. I feel like in general, I'm just kind of the kind of person that doesn't get tired of food like that and can live in kind of a monotonous state and not get super bored of it. So, just getting up and hiking every day, some people might think of that as like monotonous and boring, but for me, that really wasn't an issue. So, um, yeah, I would say similar to the food, I didn't really get tired of it for the most part. Daniel, did you find the trail more physically challenging or mentally challenging? Um, I think I definitely found it more physically challenging. For me, um, most of the mental challenge was in the first like 2 to 3 weeks, and then in Pennsylvania as well. So, what I mean by that is the first 2 to 3 weeks were definitely the most physically challenging, and so that was making me question in my head whether I could do the 100-day goal that I set out for myself. So that was that definitely made it challenging mentally, I think. And yeah, so the first like once I got into the Bigelows and then some of those other tough mountains in southern Maine, that's when I was really like, oh man, this is getting tough. I'm starting to kind of question whether I can complete this in 100 days. And then I was going through the whites. I had to slow down some, so I got behind schedule some. And so at that point, I was just kind of worried mentally, whether I'm going to be able to complete this. And my confidence wasn't super high at that point. But once I got down Mount Moosilauke and into New Hampshire, like very southern New Hampshire and Vermont, the trail just got so much easier. And within like 3 days, my confidence just like soared because I was like, man, I can do this. Like, I am crushing these miles now, and I'm going to be able to do this in 100 days. I'm going to be able to catch up my schedule, and I think I'm going to, be able to finish this in 100 days. And then by the time I got to Virginia, I was on track for sure. And honestly, at that point, I was considering, trying to finish early, which I didn't end up doing for a number of reasons. But yeah, I did definitely, definitely, like I said, had some mental difficulties in Pennsylvania as well, just with getting bored. But in terms of the physically challenging aspect, I would say, even though the beginning was the toughest physically, there was always sections throughout the whole trail that were tough. Even if it was only a few miles at a time, there were sections along the whole trail that kicked my butt, and I slowed down so much, and stuff like that. So the beginning was tough. The first month was tough, but there were sections along the whole trail that were tough, even if they just weren't as long. So definitely lots of physical challenges the whole way. Yeah, I'm definitely glad that I finished, in that 100 days and got done before all the flooding and rain, just because that would have been tough and a big challenge. And who knows whether I would have finished or not. What's your career objective starting your own business? So yeah, for right now, I think I'm definitely, like I said, just trying to get a job in the firmware embedded software field, and trying to get a start there. And I do have some interest, I would say, in business ownership and stuff like that. But at this point, I'm just really not sure like what industry or field or concept that lies in. And so that's kind of where I run into trouble, and I'm not really sure where to go from there. So I think maybe I'll come upon that at some point in time, but not really have a good idea of that at this point. Oh, that's good. I was thinking your name was Snowman from eating all the ice cream. That's funny. Not a bad guess, actually. Don asked, were you happy with the gear? Any changes you would change if you had to do it again, what degree sleeping bag did you have? So I think my sleeping bag was rated for 18 degrees at the coldest, and like 25 or 30 in the more like comfortable range. And I was pretty much comfortable and not really cold ever. There was definitely a few nights that I was a little chilly. I think it would have been somewhere north of Damascus, Virginia, within that 100 or 200 mile section north of Damascus. There were a few really chilly, quite chilly nights in the 40s, and I didn't have like all of my warm clothes on, so I was, I think, a little chilly at one point during one of those nights. And then I do remember one night in Maine. I'm trying to think of what the mountain was called. I think it was called Bemis Mountain or Bemis Mountain, however you pronounce it. I was on top of that mountain at like 3,000 feet, and there wasn't much. There was trees around, but it wasn't super dense, and it got pretty windy at night, and so the wind was really whipping around, and I actually had stayed in the shelter that night. So the wind was really whipping into the shelter, and I got a little bit chilly from the wind that night, I do remember. But I think if I was in my tent that night, I would have been perfectly fine, because the tent really protects you from the wind and kind of keeps some of the hot air around. So got a little sidetracked from that question, sorry. But I think overall I was pretty happy with my gear. The one thing I was a little bit disappointed with was my backpack, just because it was just kind of getting like holes in it and seemed like it was falling apart a little bit. So I did have one hole in my side pocket that I use to carry my water bottles, but that hole, I'm pretty sure I just like fell and like scraped it or got it stuck on something, and so that's how that hole formed. And then I had two pockets, little pockets, zipper pockets on the hip belt, one on each side, and those just kind of like got holes that formed and got progressively bigger that were around the edges, and I was kind of disappointed in that, and that was just kind of a little annoying to have those holes form and stuff like that. And then I also had the chest strap that broke the last, like, I think it was like 2 weeks before the end of the trip. So that was a little annoying, but it really wasn't that big of a deal. So yeah, I don't know if I would have changed the pack at all. I think, yeah, I definitely had a great tent. I was really happy with the tent. Most of my clothes and my rain jacket worked out great. I think I'm honestly, I did like my boots as well. I thought those worked out pretty well for me. So honestly, if I was going to do it again and wanted to spend more money on gear, I definitely would get, better, lighter weight gear and stuff like that. Most of my gear was pretty solid, but it wasn't like ultra lightweight or anything like that. So I definitely could have gotten lighter gear if I wanted to spend more money. So that could be a change for sure. And looks like I missed a question actually from Steve up here. How much weight did you lose? So I think I lost about 10 to 15 pounds on the trip, which honestly is more than I wanted to lose, but is really not too bad, I would say, in my opinion. But depending on how you look at it, you could call it maybe fortunate or unfortunate. I've pretty much gained all that weight back in the 2 or 3 weeks already, which I feel is kind of unfortunate, just because it's been in not a good way, just because I've been mostly sitting around. I haven't been nearly as active as I was before the trip, just because my body's taking a little bit of time to recover, and just kind of this week I'm getting back into a regular workout schedule and stuff like that. So wasn't super active and was eating a lot. So pretty much, like I said, gained all that weight back that I lost. I'm around 175, 180 pounds now. So another question here: how many pairs of boots, shoes did you wear out? So I basically had 3 total pairs of boots and shoes on the trail. I had my first pair of boots that was basically a traditional type of boot. It was a Loa brand that I bought, just like a few months before the trip, and I wore those a few times to kind of break them in. And I really liked the boots. I thought they worked out great for me. And those lasted me about 1,200 miles. It probably could have lasted a little bit longer, but that was when my mom and aunt and girlfriend came to hike with me. So I just asked my mom to bring the boots or my next pair of shoes when she came. So those lasted 1,200 miles, and then I got a pair of Saucony trail running shoes. I think the specific model, it was a Saucony Peregrine shoe. And those were good shoes. I liked them, but I didn't know what I didn't know when I bought them, and they were not that good for hiking the Appalachian Trail based on the difficulty of the terrain and stuff like that on the trail. And so those only ended up lasting 2 or 3 weeks. I think about 350 miles. And I think those shoes could have lasted longer, but they basically got this hole or like crack in the bottom that extended all the way up through the sole, and rocks would like get stuck up in there. And for the most part, those rocks didn't bother me at all, and they didn't hurt my feet and weren't like poking me or anything. But just based on the size of that hole, I was feeling like if something goes wrong here and there's like a bigger issue, and this shoe like falls apart all of a sudden, that could be a really big catastrophic issue that could really slow me down or injure me. So I basically wanted to solve that problem before it occurred. So I just bought another pair of shoes and had it shipped to a town I was heading to, and got those new pair of shoes before I had to have that issue. So that third pair of shoes I had was a La Sportiva Ultra Raptor, and I really enjoy those shoes. I did a little bit more research, and by that I mean I looked up best shoes for hiking the Appalachian Trail, and those were one of the options that I could get shipped fairly quickly. So those are the shoes I bought, and they were a little bit more like a boot than the Saucony shoes, but they were still definitely a shoe, and I really enjoyed those. Those lasted, the whole 630 or maybe it was 660 miles. I think it was 630 some miles from Perrysburg, Virginia, all the way to the end, and they probably still have some life in them still. I have them at home here. Haven't really used them at all, but I could maybe if I needed to. So yeah, 3 pairs of shoes, and the good thing is the boots were expensive and they lasted a while, and then the other 2 pairs of shoes weren't too expensive. I think they were both about $100, maybe a little bit less, so it really wasn't that expensive to get those other shoes. And then like Kevin mentioned, the gaiters were a super big help as well. Once I think I was wearing long pants the first month or so, and then I started wearing shorts the rest of the time, and once I was wearing shorts, I was getting a whole ton of like dirt and debris all the time in my shoes and socks, which was just annoying. And I didn't get the idea to buy gaiters until like close to the last week in Virginia, but those definitely helped out a lot and made the experience better. Did I carry a basic compass and paper map? So the answer is no. I didn't have any sort of actual compass or map, or like physical map. I did have obviously the Far Out app on my phone, which I had the maps downloaded onto, but again, that doesn't help if I'm out of phone battery or my phone gets broken or something like that. But for the most part, having a map isn't, I would say, on the AT of the utmost importance. It's definitely helpful and probably very recommended, but just because of the blazes, especially if hey, I don't have this map right now, I need to pay attention to the blazes very carefully and make sure I'm following the trail, most likely you'll be perfectly fine. And then in terms of compass, I didn't technically have a physical compass, but my watch here does have a compass on it, that is like super easy to use. And again, obviously that's relying on the watch to be charged and working, but for the most part, I didn't have issues with that. And my watch battery is like super small, so I figured, even if my battery pack is like getting super low, it should probably be able to charge my watch at least a little bit. So like I said, wasn't super concerned about that stuff, but also maybe I didn't have the best plan in place there in terms of worst case scenarios, I guess, but it ended up working out for me. So how did the heat affect you mentally and physically? So for me, I felt like the heat wasn't that bad. I think one of the hottest sections for me was in New York. That was really hot. I remember just dripping going up Bear Mountain in New York, and later that day and some of the other days, I was just a really hot section. And then there were some pretty hot days in Virginia as well. But honestly, I felt like I didn't have a super bad time in terms of heat and didn't have a ton of super hot days. So it really wasn't that big of an issue, I felt like. And, I got hot, but that was just a little bit of it was certainly something I had to deal with in terms of making sure I was drinking more water, obviously, and stuff like that. And, making that also affected, how long I could go without filling up my water. So it was definitely something that affected me, but it really wasn't a super big obstacle I had to, get over, I would say. Do you regret not having a tramley? No, I don't think so at all. I feel like I'm a very independent and like self-supporting type of person, and so and I really like, setting my own schedule and being, on top of things and stuff like that. And so I don't really regret that at all. I think I really enjoyed the way I did the hike, and the way I kind of think about it is I really enjoyed the solitude. I very much enjoyed, having campsites and shelters to myself and just having time to relax and be alone. But on the other hand, I definitely enjoyed, meeting other people, talking to them, and I very much enjoyed times when I did have other people at the campsite and shelter that I could talk to and get to know a little bit more. So I enjoyed both sides of that, but I definitely don't regret not having a trail family or anything like that. So, yeah. Have you watched other thru hikers videos? I've definitely watched some other thru hikers videos. I know there was a guy that I was watching some. He was a Nobo before I started the trail. I think he started sometime in February, maybe pretty early. I'm trying to remember his name now. It was something catchy. He always did like a symbol, like a hand like this at the end of the video. But I know he had like some knee issues and had to get off the trail. Let me actually just look it up real quick because I feel like I should be able to remember this. I know he had some knee issues, a fair amount of times, and he ended up getting off the trail sometime in Pennsylvania, towards the northern end of Pennsylvania. And so I don't think he finished. I know he was trying to, fix his knee and do therapy and stuff like that, and was hoping to maybe be able to finish, in 2024. Oh, his name was Hang Loose. That's what it was. Yeah. He was hoping to be able to finish this year, and maybe, if he could get back on trail by September or October, starting at Katahdin and then going south to, where he left off in Pennsylvania. But as far as I can see, he hasn't started back up again. So I did enjoy some of his videos, and actually what I enjoyed doing is towards the end, or even after I've gotten off the trail, I watched some of his videos, and I would, watch his video of an area that I did and kind of compare it to what I experienced in that area and stuff like that. So I kind of enjoyed that a little bit. And then there was a southbounder I actually met very early on named Clicking Heels. I met him, I think, day 3 of the 100-mile wilderness, and we ended up staying at the same shelter. He was a hammock camper guy, which I thought was cool. I think that's cool in general. And he's been posting some videos, but he's not, his videos are like really behind at this point. Like I think one of his most recent videos is like day 27, whereas now he's probably on like day 120 if he's still on the trail. So his videos are like really behind, and I haven't seen them. So I hope he's still out there hiking, and I hope he eventually posts more videos, because his videos were a lot more polished than mine, let's say that. And he got some really good, videos and pictures of just a lot of the scenery along the way, and I enjoyed seeing that. And yeah, those were the two hikers. And then there was another guy, Chuck Howell. I forget his name. I know he was hiking with someone else, and him and one other guy were Bandit and Bluegrass. I think he was Bandit, and the other guy was Bluegrass. And I actually heard about him because someone in the comments section mentioned his videos, and I passed him. I think I passed him on July 4th in Massachusetts. So yeah, I passed him on July 4th in Massachusetts, like right around the Cookie Lady's house, somewhere around there. And I think I talked to him for maybe a minute, but he finished his SOBO thru hike maybe a week or two ago. So that was awesome to see. So yeah, definitely some people I saw along the way that I watched their videos a little bit. And for the most part, I wouldn't say I'm like super dedicated in terms of watching everything, because I saw a lot of the trail, so it's not super interesting, but it's definitely interesting to some degree to see other people's perspectives. Did you carry a GPS device? I don't recall seeing one. So no, I didn't have any sort of like Garmin InReach or anything like that. I don't know. I just wasn't super worried about that. Maybe that's just me being a young, naive person. But I did record all my GPS data on my watch. So every single day I would start my watch and record, the entire hike. And then if I did have service, I would upload it to Strava at the end of the day. And so my family could see that. But again, that is relying on my watch and my phone to have battery and service. And I didn't always have service at the end of the day, especially the first few weeks of the trip. So yeah, I would say the watch was the closest thing I had to a GPS device, but again, that's just another thing to carry and another thing to charge, so I wasn't super excited or wanting to, have that. So that was my choice. I don't know. Obviously, I didn't have any issues, but I can definitely see why people, want to do that. And I think with those Garmin InReaches, you can actually like send satellite text messages to people. So, even if you don't have cell service at the end of the day, you can send a text message, every day just to say, hey, I'm all right, something like that. I don't know. That could definitely be a reason to get that for sure. How was cell phone reception along the trail? It definitely varied a lot. So Maine, New Hampshire, pretty much 100-mile wilderness, there was almost no reception. I got the tiniest bits of reception, like on Mount Katahdin, and then on the other big mountain in the 100-mile wilderness. What was it called now? I'm trying to remember what it's called. I know there's Chairback Mountain in the 100-mile wilderness, but I cannot remember for the life of me what that other mountain is called. But yeah, there was another mountain in the 100-mile wilderness that I did have cell service on. Let's see. Yeah, I'm not seeing it. I'm trying to look it up here, but that's okay. Like I said, yeah, so not much, pretty much no service in the 100-mile wilderness. And then throughout Maine and southern New Hampshire, it's Whitecap Mountain, that's what it's called, of course. So yeah, throughout Maine and southern New Hampshire, there was pretty limited reception, but some of those days I did have reception, some points throughout the day or at the end of the day. And then I would say once I got into Vermont, the reception got better, and then throughout a lot of, I would say, New England, Pennsylvania, and Virginia, New England, Pennsylvania, Virginia, I had pretty consistent reception a lot of the time. I would usually check my phone maybe once every few hours, um, and then definitely at the end of the day. And a lot of times through those areas, I had some reception, and then definitely going through North Carolina, Tennessee, and Georgia, where the mountains got, I would say, a little bit bigger again, and then more ups and downs. The reception wasn't as good again, but I still had decent reception. And I would say like most days after the 100 Mile Wilderness, I usually had reception at least at one point throughout the day, and was able to like get messages or send messages at some point. So it definitely wasn't, fantastic, but I would say it was better than I expected, and I was able to communicate with my family and friends a decent bit, and have some reception. Then obviously when I got into towns, every few days to a week, I would get some Wi-Fi or at least a little bit better cell reception for the most part. So we're your trail family. Yeah, that's right. I guess your YouTube followers. So I'm not seeing any more questions. I don't think I missed any. So if you do have another question, definitely get it in. I know towards the end of the trip and right after the trip, there was a fair amount of questions about cost, and I did make a video about how much I spent on the trip, which was, the short answer is I spent about $3,500 on the trip, and there was about $1,000 of expenses that my parents ended up covering in terms of shipping food and buying some extra food that they ended up shipping out. So that was the cost. So still in terms of the total cost, still below $5,000, which I would say is still less than most people spend. So I was happy with that, keeping it fairly cheap and not having to spend a ton of money. Favorite spot on the trail? Pretty much anytime anyone asked me like what my favorite section was, I would say, Maine probably. But there was a day in North Carolina right after, just south of the Nantahala Outdoor Center. There was a big climb up at the beginning of the day, and then I just went over a series of mountains that day that had some great views. I forget what the first mountain was called. It might have been, I know there was Wesserbald, Wyabald, and Silerbald, and I think there was one more. I think the first one might have been Wyabald. And just going up that mountain that morning, there was just some fantastic views, and the clouds were, I was above some clouds, and the mountains were kind of poking out above the clouds, and I really thought that kind of view with the mountains, poking out of clouds below me was really incredible. So I really enjoyed that one. And then there was another one in either North Carolina or Tennessee. I think it was called Big Bald, where there was a similar view with lots of clouds below me and mountains poking out. And I just thought that was really incredible. So I really enjoyed those views. But like I said, I do always go back to Maine. There's just so many beautiful lakes and rivers and streams, and just awesome mosses on the ground and stuff like that. And that's one of the cool things I found in the Smokies, is like the trail was just so beautiful. There was just sections that were so flat, and there were just beautiful pine needles covering the ground, and these nice looking pine trees and mosses just blanketing the earth, and I just really thought that was cool. So any section you would rather skip than hike again? I guess maybe just Pennsylvania, some sections there, just because it was just rocky and boring. But for me, like the challenge is part of the fun. So if there's a section that's boring, that's a challenge in itself, just because it's like mentally challenging. If there's a section that's rocky, that's challenging because it's rocky, and so that's still kind of fun to me. But I would say Pennsylvania. I think Pennsylvania was my least favorite. Well, I would say my least favorite sections of the AT were in Pennsylvania. I'm not sure if Pennsylvania was my least favorite state, just because there were some cool things in Pennsylvania. But yeah. Did you get blisters? Yeah, like I said, I didn't have many super bad blisters. I definitely had blisters the first month for sure. but I didn't have many that were super bad. I just had those kind of spots on the backs of my heels that were kind of raw and like sore. They were just like kind of open wounds almost as after a while. So those are definitely the worst spots I had, but I did have some blisters, especially on my pinky toes. And I kind of just had some almost on the, I don't even know how to describe it, like below my ankle, I guess. There were spots that they weren't exactly blisters, they were just kind of a little bit sore spots, and they were like hard and callous some, but they still hurt some, and different ways I was trying to sleep at some points would put pressure on my feet different ways and would sometimes hurt. So definitely had plenty of issues, I guess you would call it, or difficulties with my feet, but it definitely wasn't a super big deal after the first few weeks. The first few weeks was definitely the worst with my feet just because of how wet they got, and then messed up. You can tell us any brain freeze from all that ice cream. Honestly, I don't think I had any brain freezes, because most of the time when I was eating the ice cream, it was like super hot out. So yeah, I definitely didn't have any brain freezes. I do remember, I think the second to last day when I went through Suckus, Georgia, or Suchis, Georgia. I'm not really sure how to say it, but I went into that town. It was like a 2-mile walk into the town, and that's actually when I hitched a ride with a police officer. But I was sitting out there outside this little gas station eating my ice cream, and it was kind of windy, and I was getting a little chilly while I was eating that ice cream, but I didn't get a brain freeze that time, or really any other time I can think of. The fire watchtower view was amazing. Yeah, I think you're probably talking about the tower I climbed the last day in the Smokies, where you could see out over Lake Fontana and stuff like that, which, yeah, I really enjoyed that view, and that was, for me, that was like the best view in the Smokies for the most part, which was a little disappointing that, that was really one of the only good views I had in the Smokies. So but it is what it is. I'm sure, I think part of the thing with the Smokies is the weather. It's just kind of moist and damp up there, so there's a lot of clouds and fog a lot of the time that obscures the views. That is kind of what I've heard. But yeah, next video, rate the privies best state to worst. That's honestly not a bad idea. It's really actually interesting, because like Maine, I would say, was some of the best privies, but it's just so remote. I just, getting in there and working on those privies just seems like so difficult, and getting the supplies in there to build those things just seems like such a feat. And honestly, I felt that way about a lot of the shelters or privies or bear boxes or whatever. Like, some of those places you just gotta hike in miles to, like, just to work on this little thing, or you gotta carry in all this lumber to build this privy, and that just seemed pretty impressive. So really do appreciate for sure all those trail maintainers and stuff like that that are working on the trail a lot of the time. So I think I'm probably gonna wrap up the live stream here in a minute or two. I really enjoyed all the questions. Honestly didn't expect to get this many, or have this breadth of questions, I guess, but yeah, I did enjoy the thru hike a lot. It was a great experience, and I'm glad I got to share it on YouTube, first of all with family and friends, but also just anyone that happened to find the videos. I'm glad it seemed like a lot of people enjoyed it, so that was pretty cool. And like I said, I'm going to continue making videos on the channel, some more in the coming weeks and months, about other parts of the AT. I think I'm going to try to talk about my gear a little bit, which I talked about a little bit in these questions, but I want to go a little bit more in depth into some of the gear stuff, and my thoughts on the gear that I used. And then I also want to probably talk about a little bit more like my favorite sections or stuff like that, or maybe unexpected things that happened to me, or just like unexpected experiences I had. So definitely going to keep making videos, and there'll be fitness videos in the future as well, like running or what have you, stuff like that. So definitely hope people stick around for that. Barry says, congrats. Thank you very much. I was definitely very impressed and just surprised, I guess, by how many people left comments and super kind words when I finished the trail and stuff like that. So really appreciate that. And yeah, I really appreciate everyone watching and following along and stuff like that. It really means a lot that people are interested, so I thought that was pretty cool. Yeah, I do, like you say, need a few more subscribers to reach that 1,000 mark. I'm still trying to get there, and it's slowed down a lot, frankly, since I finished the thru hike. But hopefully, like I said, I'm going to keep posting more videos. So hopefully I can get to 1,000 subscribers sometime soon, but it's really not the end of the world if that doesn't happen, but maybe it will. We will have to see. But I think I'm going to end it here. Thanks everyone for coming on the live stream and asking great questions, and thanks for all your support along the way. I will see you all in the next one.